All right, welcome everybody to this panel. We will be discussing Latin art and community engagement. My name is Camilo Loaiza Bonilla, and I am the 2025-2026 Eleanor Merritt Fellow here at the John and Mabel Ringling Museum of Art. Today, I will be introducing Stephen, who will introduce our wonderful panelists. And I would like to first begin by letting you know what we're talking about. Today, we will be discussing how to enact strategic and systemic inclusion of Latin contemporary art and artists in exhibitions, programming, and collecting practices. As you may know, the Ringling is the State Art Museum of Florida, and we are charged with representing all Floridians. Yet, the exhibition and collecting of contemporary Florida-based Latin artists has been a slow practice. Here, we're going to learn from our museum leaders and trustees how policy, strategic planning, and fiscal focus empowered our museum to host Nuestro Vaivén, our sway, a refreshing exhibition that showcases Florida-based Latin artists while centering community engagement in meaningful ways. Without further ado, I would like to introduce Stephen High, who will be moderating this panel. Stephen High, Executive Director of the John and Mabel Ringling Museum of Art, is senior faculty at Florida State University. He has worked in art museums since 1977 and has held museum positions in cities from San Francisco to Boston. Joining the Ringling in 2011, he has undertaken major strategic planning, launched design, construction, and the opening for the Kotler-Kovo Glass Pavilion and the Chow Center for Asian Art, as well as rebranded the Ringling and opened the Terrell Sky Space, Tibble Circus Galleries, the Bulger Play Space, and the Monda Gallery of Contemporary Art. He was recently appointed as a commissioner for the American Alliance of Museums Accreditation Commission. He manages a staff of over 250 with an operating budget of over 26 million. He has an MA in art history from Williams College and an MBA degree from the School of Business, Virginia Commonwealth University. High's curatorial experience and interests are in modern and contemporary art. Without further ado, here is Stephen High.
Thank you, Camille. I appreciate the introduction, and it's my honor to introduce our speakers for today. And I'm going to begin right away with Francine Birbragher-Rozencwaig, is an art historian, independent curator, and art critic. She received a master's in art history and a PhD in Latin American history from the University of Miami. She is a founding and contributing editor of Art Nexus magazine and the executive director curator of the Art Nexus space in North Miami, Florida. She is also the artistic director of the Fundación País in Guatemala. Since 1989, she has written about modern and contemporary art for specialized magazines, newspapers, artist monographs, and exhibition catalogs. She is the author of essays on 20th century Latin American art, and as an independent curator, she has organized over 100 exhibitions in the United States and Latin America, including the 23rd País Biennial in Guatemala. A former board of directors member of the John and Mabel Ringling Museum of Art Foundation, she currently serves on the board of directors of the Friends of the Uffizi Gallery in Florence, Italy. She belongs to several professional organizations, including the International Association of Art Critics, the College Art Association, the Association for Latin American Art, Art Table, Fiber Artists Miami Association, and the Women Photographers International Archive. Next up is Mercedes Soler, has been recognized throughout Spanish language television across the Americas for over 3 decades. Having moved to the Suncoast in 2018, Mercedes and her husband, Tomas Martinez, founded Solmart Media, a Spanish radio and digital media company based in Sarasota, with 7 radio stations, currently reaching an audience of over 1.5 million listeners. But if you were watching Univision when Primer Impacto went on the air 30 years ago, you'll recognize her as one of its founding anchors and correspondents, having traveled the continent and interviewed over a dozen Latin American presidents. Mercedes also hosted her own Noti Mujer live show for CNN Espanol, wrote columns for El Nuevo Herald, taught journalism to international Spanish language students at the University of Miami, and coached media and press strategies to U.S. diplomats based in Latin America as a subcontractor for the State Department. She currently sits on the board of the Community Foundation of Sarasota County, the John and Mabel Ringley Museum of Art, is a member of the advisory committee of ISLAC, University of South Florida's Institute for the Study of Latin America and the Caribbean, and a member of the International Women's Forum. She's the recipient of 5 Emmy Awards, 1 Peabody, and 1 GLAAD Award, among other accolades. Her favorite title is that of mom to a brilliant young woman who works for Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisors in New York City, and an outstanding son who's completing a law degree at DePaul University in Chicago. This summer, 2026, Mercedes and Tomas, who met as students while working at Loyola University's 88.7 FM radio station in Chicago, will celebrate their 40th wedding anniversary. They've come full circle in their careers and attribute their success to the hard work and resilience instilled in all immigrant families. Our last speaker is Javi Suárez, is a Sarasota-based architect, artist, and Ringling Board member emeritus. Born in Santurce, Puerto Rico, he received his Master of Architecture from UCLA. Suarez is a founding partner of Suarez Architecture, an award-winning architectural firm whose projects include Sable Palm Plaza, Planned Parenthood of Southwest and Central Florida, and the Panther Ridge Residence. He has exhibited his paintings at Parsons School of Design in New York, Galleria Boteo, San Juan, Patricia Correa Gallery, Santa Monica, California, and Ball State University, Muncie, Indiana. He is a Distinguished Alumni Hall of Fame member of RHS and a Leadership Florida Class 27 graduate. And now finally, our curator for the Nuestro Vaivén is Amy Rosenblum-Martín. She is the curator of Nuestro Vaivén, and she is a New York-based independent curator of contemporary art who is bilingual and specializes in Latin American art history. Her practice centers on decolonial methodologies and collaborative, community-centered exhibition making. She is a co-curator of the 40th Annual Bienal de Cuenca in Ecuador, where her selection of the Ecuadorian artist Carmen Vicente received the Patrice Munoz Acquisition Prize. And she will serve as curator for the 27-28 edition as well. Former staff of the Perez Art Museum, Miami, the Metropolitan Museum, and the Bronx Museum. Her exhibitions include Ana Mendieta, Thinking About Children's Thinking, which was an Art Forum critics pick, ISCP's Adjani Okpuegba, Delegitimization, Solidarity, The Myth of Violent Africa, which was selected among Hyperallergic's top 10 New York City shows of the year, and Swagger and Tenderness at the Bronx Museum of the Arts, reviewed by Hilton Els in the New Yorker. She was guest assistant curator for Marking Time, Art in the Age of Mass Incarceration at MoMA PS1, named by the New York Times as one of the most important moments in art of 2020. She moderated the panel Inheritance, Museums, Archives, Memory, and Culture at the Stellenbosch Triennale in South Africa, and she is on staff at the Solomon R. Guggenheim Museum and the New School, and serves on the board of the Department of Visual Art at Beacon House National University. She holds an MA in Art History from Columbia University. And I am now going to turn it over to Amy. If you could give us a bit of an overview of the exhibition and some of your thoughts about its structure. Amy?
Hi, Stephen. Thank you so much for having us here. I'm really excited about having this panel, and it was an honor to suggest that this panel happen. So it's great to see it being realized. Let me tell you all about Nuestro Vaivén. So Nuestro Vaivén, Our Sway, is the Ringling's first major exhibition of Latin American contemporary art with 60 artworks by 22 artists in 7 galleries. So I paired well-established artists from South and Central Florida with Sarasota community leaders who hadn't seen themselves as part of the art world before this. These 4 Latin leaders who work in radio, medicine, entrepreneurship, and hair care shaped 8 commissioned major artworks by just talking with the artists. So the seed of this exhibition came from when I was speaking with my Harlem neighbor and friend Maxine, and she asked me if I could get her a museum for one of her fabulous Puerto Rican parties. And she saw that the museum would elevate her party, and I saw that her party making was actually art. So inspired by that idea, each Sarasota leader actually made a party inside of the art exhibition, and the party itself is art. So I'm really excited by the public response and support of this exhibition. And I am hopeful that it will inspire a lot more exhibitions of Latin contemporary art at the Ringling and other institutions that are similar to the Ringling all over the place. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Amy. Uh, I would just like to say a few things regarding sort of how this exhibition came to be. Uh, we had, we have featured contemporary art and historic art for many, many years, and we've featured a number of Latin artists over the years, including Coco Fusco, Manuel Bravo, Ibrahim Miranda, who is the artist who made the painting behind me, and most recently, Sandy Rodriguez. But we've never really worked on a comprehensive show of a Latin artist, nor have we really ever really focused on this part of Florida, on the Florida Peninsula, and the types of artists that are working on this in Florida. And so I went looking, actually went to see Francine and asked her who would be a curator who could really sort of address the issues that we were hoping to get at over the course of this exhibition. And she mentioned several different people, but I was intrigued by Amy and gave her a call. And we immediately hit it off, and it's been great ever since. And what was most important for me, and it was her way of working. She doesn't work specifically from the art, she works from the community into the art. And that is such a different way for a curator to work and a really impactful way, because all along the way, as she's working on this project, she's bringing people together. And the outcome of the exhibition was really a series of parties that we had at the along the way while the exhibition was open, that the different uh, individuals who coordinated the different exhibitions were able to celebrate with their friends and family and have a good time at the museum. And we love the way it made the museum exciting and fun, and the way that everyone sort of really enjoyed participating in the exhibition. So that's a little bit about how it came to be, and we've been very pleased with the input from our visitors, and it's been a very successful program. So I want to thank everyone who is working with us to make this thing possible. So I'm going to turn the discussion now to our list of experts here and have them give some talking points about the kinds of roles you see museums playing in communities today. And maybe you could start with Francine, and you could start us off.
Thank you, Stephen, and thank you, Amy. I'm going to talk from an engaged board member. I first served on the board of the Museum of Contemporary Art in North Miami for many years, for almost 15 years, when Bonnie Clearwater was the director curator of the museum. And when MoCA just started, it just actually celebrated the 30th anniversary. It was very clear that it was a museum that was built and open for the North Miami community. So I was totally in agreement with the fact that the museum is not a shell, and a collection doesn't make sense if it's not shared, if there's not a connection with the community. So when I was honored to be invited by the Ringling after working 7 years in Sarasota, and I thank Mercedes and Javi for recommending me for the board, and I served on the board of the Ringling for 2 years. We, all three of us, were very clear about the fact that it was necessary for the Ringling Museum as the state museum to provide that platform for Latin American artists from Florida, from Latinx artists from Florida, to have a voice and to have a way to connect with the community, not just the Latinx community, but the community at large, and to help people understand that there's not such thing as a museum that is away from their lives, that the culture is part of everyday's life and everybody's life. So we're very thankful to Stephen and the team, and of course to Amy, for bringing this project to fruition. Things like these don't happen from one day to the next. It's been a long process, but the results have been tremendous. I had the opportunity to be there for the opening day, and it was very, very exciting and very gratifying. And the other thing that's important is, just like Latin America is seen as a unity and is not, Florida is also seen as a unity and is not. Latinx artists are seen as a unit and is not. We all have our own independent views, ways of expressing ourselves. And I think Amy did a wonderful job selecting these artists for this exhibition. She could have picked hundreds, if not thousands. And we hope that this is just the beginning and the first of many exhibitions at the Ringling that feature these wonderful, talented artists, and the way that they were connected with these community leaders. And I'm going to give a shout out to Javi, because he was instrumental in making these connections to move forward and to serve as an example, as a model for other institutions, not only in Florida, in the US, and worldwide, about how to really move forward with what a museum should be in the 21st century.
Thank you, Francine. Javi, do you want to follow up on that to some degree?
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Francine, for kind words. Yes, I think, as you mentioned, it's been a journey that we're all very proud of. I started in the museum on the board at a time where there was really a push to diversify the board itself. And in that process, we were able to, as the time went, get more Latin American representation on the board, which led to the culmination of this show. I'm very proud of the connection that Amy brought in terms of this show and to the community. I myself moved here from Puerto Rico when I was 10 years old, so I know Sarasota from the vantage point of a young man and also as a professional. And when Amy reached out to try to find community leaders, I automatically knew that she wanted to find full representation, meaning a variety of countries, a variety of people and viewpoints. So the community leaders such as Ala Toledo, who's a salon owner from the Dominican Republic, Dr. Manuel Gordillo, who's an infectious disease specialist and from Peru, Gloria Noemi Lopez Herrera, who's Nicaraguan, and she's involved in immigration and really uplifting the people here, Sarasota, Nicaragua, and Diana Gonzalez, who's already a personality from Mexico, really represented the breadth of Latin American community leaders in Sarasota, and were really quite influential to be able to get Amy's vision of a partnership between the artists and the community. We had a really quite important meeting, which was called the Hinge meeting, the Bisagra meeting, where the artists met with the community leaders, and their discussions really led to quite a bit of new work that was developed specifically for this show. So we're very proud of that fact that this show not only represents a variety of different people, but that there's work that's specifically made for this show. So
Thank you, Javi. And to finish up on this question, maybe we can have Mercedes address a little bit more about the community, how communities are sort of evolving within, and museums are evolving to create more communication.
I don't know how many museums are evolving. I know that the Ringling has evolved. I know there's a before Nuestro Vaivén and there's an after Nuestro Vaivén, and that's because of Amy Rosenblum and her incredible stepping out of the box thinking in the creation of this exhibit. I'm going to tell you from my own personal experience, because I've taken at least half a dozen groups of people and given them personal tours. Out of these people, I'd say about 200 to 250 people, I've seen 3 or 4 or 5 literally cry in front of some of these pieces of work. I told you, Stephen, that when I first saw the exhibit with Amy, I had tears in my eyes. I was so overwhelmed. And the reason I was overwhelmed is because this exhibit, and I hope we can start showing some videos so I can talk about it, this exhibit speaks to the hearts of the Hispanic community, which, like you said, Francine, is not a monolith, but speaks to all of our countries of origin. Right here, we're seeing the work of Rigoberto Torres, and these pictures were taken of local Hispanic women in the area by a Latina photographer, first when they were young kids, and then later on as adults. And then Rigoberto Torres came and he cast their portraits. To be seen in this light, to be seen, to be just a part of the community, my neighbor, my friend, and now my face being exhibited in such an important institution can bring someone to tears. And that's been the response I've seen. I really believe that this is the way that exhibitions should be done from now on. What you're seeing here is in that same room, Amy set up a little table so people that come in with their friends and family could sit down, play domino, play cards. We did it, my friend, before Bad Bunny did it in the Super Bowl halftime. We said, come into our casita because you're home here. So I see the exhibit as a gift to the state of Florida from Hispanics in the state of Florida, Hispanics that make up 22% of the population of this state of 20-some million people. We feel represented, we feel seen, and it's all because of the vision of the very few people on the screen here and the formidable staff at the Ringling Museum.
Thanks, Mercedes. That's great. It's always really wonderful to hear you talk. So we're going to transition into another section, which is really about trustee advocacy. And I think I'll have Javi address this first question, which is, this exhibition is something you and others have been advocating for across many years. Could you talk about the strategies you use as a museum trustee to move this project forward?
Well, I think we, Stephen, really felt that, in some ways, how they say, if they build it, they will come. You saw some of the images there of the work that was done by Rigoberto Torres. One of the casts was of Ana Toledo, who's a salon owner. And she has lived in Sarasota after she moved from the Dominican Republic to Puerto Rico back here. For 30 years, she's been the salon owner where my entire family, my grandmothers, my sister, my mother, my daughter go to, and it's the cultural hub of the community. And to see her represented there, and for her to feel welcome, to be the first time that she was at the Ringling, even though she knew about the importance of the Ringling Museum, but to have something where she felt comfortable and felt like this was really about being seen as something that us as trustee members kept pushing for. And I think really it was a matter of persistence and dedication on behalf of Mercedes, Francine, and others, where we really thought that the way to engage this large aspect of the Florida community was by really dedicating a show that was and is about us.
Thank you, Javi. Thank you. Mercedes, it's a fine line between advocating for a show and dictating staff priorities. So can you tell us a little bit how trustees can support the staff in a complex exhibition such as Nuestro Vaivén?
Well, in my case, I've been on the board now. I'm terming out at the end of the summer. This is my 6th year. And my first year on the board, at the end of the first year, I wasn't sure the place was a good fit for me. I love art. I've always loved art, and I'm an art collector. But I didn't see that representation that I wanted. I know that the museum has a classical collection, but I wanted to see representation of the Hispanic community. As far as advocacy, the board is made up of close to 20 trustees. At the time, there was maybe two or three Hispanics. I was brought in by a Cuban American from Miami, Leslie Pantin. Javi was on the board. Dr. Lisa Merritt was on the board. And then I asked Francine to join for the express reason that we may present the idea of a Hispanic, a Latin American art exhibit. And I think it starts from that. I think the board needs to become involved. They need to feel empowered, and they need to find opportunities, because at the end of the day, this becomes an incredible opportunity for a museum that has never done anything like it. So that's part of the advocacy. And also, when working with the staff, in my case, my background is television. So I brought in all I could to help. I brought in my radio stations, and I gifted a $12,000 3-month media campaign to promote the exhibit throughout the entire last summer. I put all the artists on the air on a weekly basis on social media, and we sponsored the exhibit. We talked about it on the radio ad nauseum. We have associations with Telemundo and Univision. We went and did segments about it. We called in our friends in the media. They came in to cover and do live shots during the opening inauguration. I called other friends who did a whole 1 hour show and invited many of us on the show to promote. So once the board approves and we find the money and the exhibit gets off the ground, it needs to be supported. And it needed to be supported for 6 months. On top of that, I've taken at least like I said, I've been taking tours and bringing in dozens and dozens of people, because through word of mouth, it also grows more legs. So that's part of the work of the advocacy that you do behind the scenes to support an exhibition of this scale, which has been magnificent.
I have to say, Mercedes has done an outstanding work here. You have really brought in so many people, and you've reached so many people out
Gracias.
in the community about this exhibition. And so it wouldn't have been at all as successful without your advocacy. So thank you. And also the Javi's work as well. And also Francine. So Francine, can you tell us a little bit about your role in advocating for this exhibition in the community, but also because you're involved in museums in the Miami area as well, how trustees can use their networks in order to build attention and excitement about a particular exhibition.
So when I first became involved with museums, institutions in the US, especially in South Florida, the perception was that boards were there to make decisions and bring in money. Like the highlight was how much the contribution was, at that point was a give or get, and then sit and listen to reports. I was never of that team. As an art historian, as an upcoming curator at the time, I wanted to be more involved. So communication was key. Communication with the director, communication with the curators, sharing information, sharing experiences, doing the artist studio visits. And then I realized that as a team, together with obviously the director, the curators, and the staff, there was much education needed, because they were not exposed and they were not knowledgeable about what I was passionate about, which was Latin American art. And I remember when I first interviewed with Steve before I was appointed, we started talking about the magazine. And the first thing I did was to bring a whole collection of our Nexus for the library. So the education aspect is key. And then you start talking and you try to support their vision and their ideas. But at the same time, you are empowered in that position to make these recommendations, to make these suggestions. And I think key of all these is collaboration, is talking to Javi, talking to Mercedes, knowing Amy, making that networking. I remember showing Javi's work. I mean, it was not a museum, but it was a different space. But I meet Javi and he hasn't shown his work as an artist in a long time. And that's where the conversation started. So communication, education, networking, supporting the staff. Without the staff, without the direction, this cannot happen. But when you have a passion, sharing that passion takes you a long way.
Thank you, Francine. So we haven't heard anything from our curator here, and so I think it's your time to sway, and let's see what you can do here with all your curated work, both in New York City and Miami and internationally as well. each of these museums that you've worked in or organizations that you've worked in has its own sort of processes and ways of working. And what was it like when you came here to Sarasota as our guest curator and work on this show with a state art museum, which is not always that usual?
Thank you very much, Stephen. I am going to start out by returning to the fact that Francine put my name in the hat, and thank you, Francine. I'm forever grateful for that, because this has been really a transformational experience working on Nuestro Vaivén with the Ringling and with all of you. And so I remember when I first got the phone call from Stephen asking if I might be, interested in being interviewed for this position to curate what he said was the Ringling's first major Latin contemporary art exhibition at the time. And I said, why? Because to me, Latin art in and of itself doesn't, that term doesn't say much, because we don't use the term European contemporary art, right? There's every kind of art within Latin art, right? So I was curious why. And he said he wanted to expand audiences, Latin audiences in of the Ringling, and he wanted to serve them better. And then I realized that he had come to the right place, because that's precisely what I'm interested in. And as has been said today, as you said, Stephen, like first I wanted to find the community leaders, because if the goal is to expand the community and to serve them better, first I need to get to know the community. And it was a little tricky because I'm not from Sarasota. Of course, I lived in Florida for 6 years and have constantly remained in contact with my Miami colleagues, and have worked off and on in Miami all these years since I moved back up north. But I needed to get to know the community there. And so the museum staff did a great job reaching out to Latin organizations in Sarasota to try to find me my community leaders, the 4 community leaders who I was looking to meet. But actually, what I was looking for was more grassroots leaders, sort of natural magnets, very charismatic people who are natural leaders but might not have the title of leadership, official titles of leadership. And so, as Javi mentioned, he really got that somehow. He intuited what I was after, and has grown up in Sarasota. And when he took me to meet Ada at the salon, I really understood that Javi knew what I was getting at. She was perfect. It's sort of like the classic barbershop. It's definitely a community hub, and she's a community leader. And so, and Javi showed me around. He gave me a tour of Latin Sarasota, and listening to his perspective on different Latin communities within Sarasota, I was like, Javi really is getting this. And so I suggested to the museum that they hire him to be the community curator of this project, because I couldn't really do it myself, helicoptering in from New York. I needed someone on the ground. So then we became partners in this project. Me from the art historical side, I was selecting the artists. I was, the museum really and the trustees put their muscle behind supporting my research. And I came down from New York about once a month to do studio visits all over the southern half of the state to get to know artists beyond Miami. Of course, I know a lot of Miami artists. And Francine and other curators in Florida recommended artists that I hadn't heard of before, and a lot of them wound up in the show. So thank you again to Francine for that. And also to other curators like Christian Viveros-Faunay recommended, for example, Edison Peñafiel, who's a prominent artist in the exhibition also, and others. So, yeah, and so we have 22 artists in the show. representing 11 Florida counties. So that's east and west coast of Florida, starting around Orlando, all and including Miami, and also representing 11 Latin American countries. And I was very careful about gender balance, of representation, age balance, racial balance. There are, Latin is not a race. So we have artists who are Latin who are white, black, brown, Asian, and every combination thereof. And that was done very intentionally to make sure that no one walked away thinking that they understood what Latin American artists look like or what Latin American art looks like. Because as you can see, there's a mix of, from abstraction to representation and sort of everything in between, lots of found objects, but also sort of more traditional painting, lots of mixed media installations. There's social practice or socially engaged art represented in the exhibition. As you can see, there's work on paper, graphite on paper. The work above it is made of wax, et cetera, et cetera. So really, you can't pigeonhole what Latin American art is or who Latin American artists are.
Thanks, Amy. Thanks, Amy. Well, Javi, as Amy said, you came in right at the beginning and quickly came on as community curator. Could you tell us from your perspective, your role, how it supported Amy's work, and how it involved our local communities?
Yes, Stephen, I think it really was trying to understand Amy's vision and to find those individuals, as she mentioned, that were leaders in a different way, not necessarily by title, but leaders by the kind of work that they did in the community, whether that's bringing people together and creating a safe space for them, whether that's bringing people together by supporting a particular country or area like Central America, Nicaragua, or whether that's a doctor. In this case, you see some images here of some of the work that was done about practice in the medical field and sort of revival and some of those aspects. And Amy can speak a little bit more about that, but Dr. Gordillo was instrumental in the conversation from his infectious disease side and having lived through COVID here in Sarasota and what that was like not only at the state level, but also at the local level, and pushing for vaccination and being a leader in that way. I think ultimately, for me, as a kid growing up in Sarasota, moving from Puerto Rico, and having a hard time fitting in, it really was, as Mercedes mentioned, this show really quite emotional, to have a full circle moment to come back to a place where I visited as a child, and seeing the work that was at the Ringling, with this focus on European art and even contemporary art, and seeing some shows that had some Latin American artists, but to really have a show that was and is about us, for me, it just resonated personally, and I think it did for those who came in afterwards, especially at those celebrations for the leaders, when they had their own parties and they got to invite their families and their friends, and to see how emotional they got because they were put on this pedestal that they thought maybe they didn't deserve, or maybe it was something that they would never dream of happening. It was very emotional for them as well to be seen in the community as doing the kind of work that really they've been doing without getting the recognition, really doing the work because they believe in what they do.
Thanks, Javi. It's wonderful sitting here looking at these pictures, and saw that little honeycomb piece that's on the edge, just the edge of this wall there. That's such a subtle work, but so beautiful as well. So that the galleries are just full of wonderful objects, and it's all because of all of you for bringing this work together. So thank you. Mercedes, you get around quite a bit and are very active in the community. I'd just like you to sort of talk a little bit about how museums can learn from our local communities, and what do communities need from their art museum?
First of all, I want to say that the main reason this exhibit happened is because of you, Stephen, because you listened to us and you went back and you listened some more, and I did personally badger you for a long time. And I'm very grateful that you did listen and took the initiative to put this forth. So thank you. I'd like to acknowledge you in public. And so the question is, how the community, what was the question?
Oh, it's like, how can museums learn from their local communities, and how do
Yes.
what do communities need from us?
The community needs to feel accepted, welcomed, and understand that the doors are open. And the museums need to understand where this community comes from. There's a video, the first video, which shows the first room with the circus, the painting of the pregnant woman under the word circo. And also there's a sculpture of corn, maize, and there's that mechanical bull, and there's that cowboy in that room. These are who our people are. This incredible mural has so much to say. This artist, Emily Martinez, who's only 25, told me that that's her mother's face. She wanted to honor her mother. She wants to paint black and brown skins. This is her father's face. Cowboys are important to our culture. And that's radio station, that's honoring the sponsor of the exhibit, the radio station, because of the consultation, right, between the DJ and the artist. What does radio do for the community? It's that person that holds your hand when a hurricane is coming through your community. It's that person that talks to you about election night and who's moving forth in the election. That sculpture there, it's a piece of corn, or it's a sculpture of corn on top of a tire with a backpack in the back. What does that say about our community that works in the field, that has to travel, that's connected to the earth, that's connected to the farm work that goes on in the state of Florida? So we can't just listen to one part of the community and leave another part out. And this particular community was listened to in a way that they'd never been listened to before. There's a little that food cart in the exhibit that it's kind of a internal conversation about the journey, where you go, whether you're going, the journey is internal, or are you coming to the US? Is it the journey north? And the Madonna's on it, hopefully you'll get there safely. These are the emotions and the thoughts going on inside our artists, inside the minds and the heads of our artists, and the artists represent the community. no community can move forward without their poets or their artists. And we are so blessed that we were able to showcase that here at the Ringling.
Thank you. Thank you, Mercedes. Francine, what do you hope other museums can learn from this kind of project, and which brings together curation and community engagement in a meaningful way?
I think the key factor is what we've been discussing all along, and is the importance of collaborating with the community, not just to bring them in to show them something or to provide a workshop or a guided tour, but to really establish this collaboration, this participation, this dialogue, where they can come, number one, and feel that they are heard, that they exist, that they are valuable for the institution, and for the institution to be honest. Because sometimes, I'm not saying names, you claim that you are representing and that you are working towards a community, or that you want to be accepted, accept diversity and all these terms that are now very much in vogue. But you have to show things with actions. You have to be true to what you're saying. And I think from this perspective, you have provided an excellent model. I mentioned it before. Everybody has to be on the same track. Everybody has to be on the same boat. That is not just providing to, is communicating, having that dialogue, listen to the needs, and then together make it happen.
Thanks, Francine. Well, believe it or not, we are getting close to the end of our session, and I want to leave time open for people to ask questions. But we're going to have a quick wrap up here. So just, I'll ask each of you a different kind of question, and if you can just give me a quick sort of response of as a response to the question. So to Amy, what are some of the key takeaways you have as the curator of this exhibition? What are you taking to your next projects?
I've been building this curatorial methodology for over a series of exhibitions, so I feel like what we were able to do here with your support was quite advanced. That said, I am proposing to take it even another level where the community leaders in the future, I'm doing a project that centers global indigeneity in the future, and our next stop will be at the Perez Art Museum of Miami. And the community leaders will also be Indigenous leaders. So I'm actually the director of that project. So I'm bringing in curators who are also Indigenous leaders, and then community leaders who are Indigenous leaders. So they're sort of speaking on the same level and in an area that's beyond art, but then it turns into an art project. So thank you very much for getting me to that point.
Thanks. Javi, what do you hope the community takes away from the exhibition?
Well, Stephen, I think what hopefully the community takes away is that as we've all mentioned, that they have been heard and have been included in a major exhibition, and that their input was received, and the work that was produced through that collaboration is world class, and that world class work will be a leap for hopefully future exhibitions, whether at the Ringling or other places, as we're discussing with the people that are listening to this panel, that this really can be a methodology when done properly and in collaboration, and when it's well supported by people like yourself, Stephen, where representation can really truly take place.
Thanks, Javi. And Francine, what do you hope the art world can learn from this exhibition project?
Well, I think what we've been discussing all along is how important it is that from a Western perspective, art was something that was for a few, made by a few, enjoyed and experienced by a few. And in the 21st century, that is no longer the case. Art is part of our culture, and we all belong to it. Oh, I'm glad that you're actually putting Juana Valdez, because she's one of the artists that I work with, and her work talks about that, talks about immigration, talks about belonging, talks about history, and how we're all connected in one way or another by all these items that she's been collecting and she's been using in her installations. Also, femininity and women inclusion, something that we have not discussed today, but that is key. And I think Amy was very, very open and very clear about that balance. And she did select many women artists who, somebody like Juana, for example, who has done everything right, had not had a one-person show in her whole career, and it was Sarasota that gave her that option and that possibility, and I was very honored to curate her show. So, that kind of like, let's take these opportunities and make it happen, especially for the artists, because in the end, we are all supporting them to make this a better world. And it sounds very cliche, but that's how I feel.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, Mercedes, you're going to have the last comment here. So, how do you hope our museum board, what do you hope our museum board will learn from this project? And what's next on the horizon?
I think the museum board needs to understand that they can put forth an agenda as long as the agenda is for the good of the community and for the betterment of the institution they serve. It's about serving. And I think in this case, the Ringling Museum did serve the community and did serve its mission of creating exhibits that do that exactly, serve the community. I don't think the Ringling will ever be the same after a mariachi party, and I don't think the community will ever be the same after hosting their party, their mariachi party at the Ringling. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. So Camille, we have 2 minutes left in our hour. Can we extend that, or do we get a couple of questions in?
We actually don't have any questions, so we're
Ah.
perfectly on time.
All right. Well, good. Well, I want to thank the panelists. It was a fantastic panel, and I've enjoyed working with you over this whole project. And well, obviously, we will continue to work together in the future. Thank you so much for your time. And Camille, thank you so much for putting this together, allowing us the opportunity to have this conversation. I appreciate your work here at the museum. And so with that, thank you, everyone, and I'll see you again soon.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Mhm.